Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this panel session. First of all, I would like to thank you for CMK and PSSRT for opportunity for me to moderate this panel session. Uh, Welcome to panelists and the participants. We would like to have a discussion here about cinema. Before that, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Rafta Farizi from UPN Veteran Yogyakarta. Now we are going to discuss about the cinema theme titled Southeast Asia Film Industry during COVID-19 pandemic. As regards the discussion we had previous day, the Southeast Asia films industry still doesn't have an absolute definition. It's still abstract and still can be penetrated or still be discussed for maybe for a different point of view or perspective. But we can agree on one thing, that is the Southeast Asia film has a unique cultural beliefs and aspects. And then we are going to the pandemic situation. There's a lot happen in our society, including in cinema context. For examples, like I think the increase of screen time for user in maybe quarantine or stay at home, like they are going to watch a movie or another content for filling the empty time in home or something. And also the streaming service are arise like Netflix or Disney Hotstar and or else that, which is going to be what the old movie availability when you are going when to the OTT or streaming service, you not only watch the new movies like in theater, but also old movies are available in OTT. And in this panel, we are going to discuss in many kind of discussion for the cinema. But today in this panel, in this room panel, we have two presentation. First presentation will going to discuss about construction of pleasure and sensuality in the film Tali Pocong Perawan and Tali Pocong Perawan juga by Christian Ivana Ardelia Putri and Heri Purwoko from Bina Nusantara University. But before the presentation starting, I would like to inform for the presenter and participant like the presenters will have 15 to 20 minutes for the presentation, and the Q&A session will go on 30 minutes, about 30 minutes after all the presentations done in presentation. And the participant can asking question by using the chat column, chat tab in Zoom interface by the format name underscore the question. And for the first presentation, construction of pleasure from Rishan Ivana Ardelia Putri and Heri Purwoko is ready. Are you guys ready? Ivana Ardelia and Heri Purwoko. Hello, Miss Ivana.
Hello.
You will have 15 to 20 minutes for the presentation. The time is yours.
Oke. Selamat siang para hadirin sekalian. Perkenalkan, nama saya Risyan Ivana Ardelia Putri. Kemudian partner saya Heri Purwoko. Kami dari Bina Nusantara University, and kami hari ini akan mempresentasikan tentang sebentar. Kami hari ini akan mempresentasikan tentang construction of pleasure and sensuality in the film Tali Pocong Perawan 2008 and Tali Pocong Perawan 2 2012. Um, the emergency of horror films that add an element of sensuality began to become a trend in the 2000 and drew debate from both film reviewers and some audience when many had expectation that the horror films they were watching would be as scary as one on the poster and title. It turned out that many were disquieted. These two things, the title and the poster, become a consideration from us when analyzed the film Tali Pocong Perawan 2008 and Tali Pocong Perawan 2 2012. Instead of showing the horrors of a film movie, several scenes in the two films actually sells woman's body, which in our opinion do not need to be shown in a sensual way. So we assume that the female body function as an object and magnet, especially for male audience. Through a cultural studies approach and Laura Mulvey's theories of male gaze, we will analyze the scenes that contain element of sensuality and decode them to see the extent of certain ideologies that arise between the two films. So this is three films yang memulai perfilman horor yang ada di Indonesia. Why is sensuality featured in film horrors? How does sensuality shape the taste of horrors? What is the difference in the element of sensuality between films 1 and films 2? So this is the two poster of Tali Pocong Perawan pertama dan Tali Pocong Perawan kedua. So apa sih tali pocong itu? So pocong rope is one of the beliefs of Indonesian people relate to the mystic world that is useful as a charm or provides protection to certain weapons in many cases. Pocong ropes from people who died on Friday night Kliwon have more of an effect, as do the bodies of women, especially the virgin one. The combination of the two is believed to be a talisman symbolic of strength and good luck. Jadi ini permulaan di mana kegunaan tali pocong itu sendiri bagi mereka. Tapi yang menjadi membedakannya adalah di Tali Pocong Perawan 1 aktornya mati, tapi di Tali Pocong Perawan kedua aktornya tidak mati dan mendapatkan yang dia mau. Tapi tali pocong tersebut yang di Tali Pocong Perawan 2 tidak mempengaruhi sama sekali untuk mendapatkan apa yang si aktor dari Tali Pocong Perawan 2 ini mau. Ini sinopsisnya, Tali Pocong Perawan 1 menceritakan tentang Nino yang terobsesi dengan Firly, kekasih kakaknya. Nino sering berimajinasi liar tentang Firly, kemudian dia menemukan bagaimana cara agar Firly bisa jatuh cinta kepadanya, yaitu dengan membakar tali pocong, kemudian memasukkannya ke dalam minuman Firly. Namun sayangnya, Nino tidak mendapatkan Firly, melainkan dia mendapatkan teror dari pocong yang kemudian merenggut nyawanya. Kemudian untuk Tali Pocong Perawan 2 menceritakan tentang Tania, perempuan yang bekerja sebagai telemarketing yang kalah saing dengan rekan kerjanya karena memiliki penampilan yang kurang sensual. Untuk mengalahkan rekannya tersebut sekaligus untuk memikat hati atasannya, Tania memutuskan untuk menggunakan pelet berupa tali pocong dari jenazah perawan. Setelah itu, tentu Tania berubah menjadi lebih sensual dan mampu memikat lawan jenis. Tetapi di sisi lain, ia diteror oleh arwah jenazah tersebut. Horror and sensuality. Horror is about the body, about how the sense and the body are tasted for resilience in a story. If sense play with screaming or moaning, then the body curve and gesture to explore, including the potential for the sensual it is. Jadi ada horor, kemudian horor untuk ketubuhan, kemudian dari ketubuhan untuk seksual, kemudian dari seksual ditujukan untuk tubuh perempuan. Kemudian ini ada kami ambil dari kutipan, they need to walk metaphorically through a door into another world, and you've got to the character to a place where the audience will buy it. Sexual desire is one great way to do that. It is an important tool for me if you forgive the experience a narrative necessity. Dan ini sensual fear-nya ada masturbation scene, female body curve, and male gaze. Masturbation scene dalam Tali Pocong Perawan 1 itu terbilang cukup banyak, mulai dari the man who masturbates, Nino imagine making love with her sister lover. Kemudian dari Tali Pocong Perawan 2 menunjukkan woman masturbating. Kemudian Tania imagine he making out with his male balls. Ini scene-scene yang dimaksud dari slide tadi. Kemudian ini dari scene Tali Pocong Perawan juga memperlihatkan scene masturbation. Kemudian female body curve, highlight woman's breasts, wearing tight clothes, use of swimming suit and topless. Kemudian untuk Tali Pocong Perawan 2 sama meng-highlight bagian payudaranya menggunakan pakaian yang ketat dan topless. Ini yang dimaksud meng-highlight payudara. Kemudian untuk the male gaze, Nino untuk Tali Pocong Perawan 1 ada Nino Spart picking up Firni from the pool. Nino approach Firni and her friends in the swimming pool, and then Nino was washing the car. Then Firni asked, "Where is Nino's brother?" Kemudian untuk Tali Pocong Perawan kedua, when Tania was noticed by Tania's neighbor boyfriend. Ini yang dimaksud tadi. Ini scene di mana Nino melihat ke arah tubuh Firni. Kemudian ini untuk yang Tali Pocong Perawan kedua, di mana tetangganya Tania melihat ke arah payudaranya Tania. Untuk conclusion-nya, based on analysis of two films in general, we do not see that there have many changes in theme. Both still include elements of sensuality, only in different portion. Tali Pocong Perawan 1 mostly show the curve of a woman's body in various ways, from swimwear showing open shirt bottoms on intimate scene between one character and another. Meanwhile, Tali Pocong Perawan 2 has smaller portion in showing the curve of woman bodies. However, there is another different. The protagonist of Tali Pocong Perawan 2 is a woman, and this woman is shown to have the same desire as men. Tali Pocong robe is also an important point in both films and having the same function to attract the opposite sex. The way the characters get the pocong robe in both is also sourced from the same way, step by step from the internet. The difference is that in the first film, it is a man who needs pellets, while in the second, it is a woman. Through this reading, we conclude that the element of sensuality is maintained because the effect is considered to be able to balance the elements of fear in horror films. The fear in this type of horror films focus on the exploitation of the woman body and not on the skeleton of the character's fear. One thing that interesting about these two films with the same director in the change in role from male characters to female protagonists, showing that both men and women are also equally in terms of attracting the other. Ya, sekian dari presentasi kami. Selamat siang.
Okay, thank you, Ivana Ardelia, for presentation about construction of pleasure and sensuality in film Tali Pocong Perawan 1 dan kedua and 2. Tali Pocong Perawan 1 and Tali Pocong Perawan 2. From this perspective, I would say like the question why the horror film needs a sexual desire for the aspects in the film, because the horror is one of the main expression from the film. But in Tali Pocong Perawan, we see a sexual attraction for other things in horror movies, like pocong rope used in sexual attraction or romantic relationship, opposite sex attraction, and also there's three aspects from this film. First of all is masturbation, and second one is female body curve and male gaze, which is not really, for me, it's not really necessary in a horror film. But in Tali Pocong Perawan, it's still you can see how the sexual attraction. And in Tali Pocong Perawan 1 and 2, I think there's not many different aspects, but in Tali Pocong Perawan 2, there has a smaller portion for the sensuality aspects. All right, we are going to the next presentation. I believe this is pre-recorded videos from Mazda Radita Roromari from Universitas Gadjah Mada and Adrian Jonathan Pasaribu from Cinema Poetica. They are going to presenting about Indonesian children films before and during pandemic. For co-host or host, can I get the assistance for the video presentation? Okay, we can start now.
From Gadjah Mada University, and I'm Adrian Jonathan Pasaribu from Cinema Poetica. This research actually starts from the current situation during the pandemic. Due to the pandemic, many people, including children, they limit their activities at home. And then also, again, because of the pandemic, people watch films through streaming services rather than physical cinema. And this situation actually makes us wonder, I mean, with all these limitations, why there are very few Indonesian children films? But then again, after we put more thoughts into it, we realized that there has been very few children films in Indonesia. And this situation is puzzling, especially if we look at the history of Indonesian cinema. After the collapse in the 90s, Indonesian cinema was revived by 3 films. We have Jelangkung, a horror film. We have Serina's Adventure, Pertolongan Serina, a children film. And then we have Ada Apa Dengan Cinta, a teen romance films. At the time, those 3 films were very popular and they attracted big number of audience. Afterwards, only 2 genres endure. After Jelangkung, we have many wave after waves of horror films. After Ada Apa Dengan Cinta, we have many teen romance films. But after Pertolongan Serina, we actually have very few. And this leads us to a question: why only few Indonesian children films? So in this research, we try to examine the underlying factors, the symptoms, the social, economic, and political factors behind the Indonesian film industry that leads to this situation. This research is meant to be a preliminary study so that we could gather and examine all the relevant science for us to make further research and further examination in the future. Our first challenge in this research is really hard to find the research of children films, especially in Indonesia and with political economic perspective. A lot of research on children films, mostly on education, psychology, literacy, and cultural perspective. But we find one difference is the Sold Separately, Parents and Children in Consumer Culture by Alan Sater. And this book is aimed to have a better understanding on childhood and parenthood in the consumer culture, especially in children's consumer culture. And this book provides the perspective on children and parents as a consumer, as well as their correlation. That this book says that parents have determination or determine the children choice of the products. And however, this book didn't explain a lot about the children as a spectator. Based on Aaron Davis investigating cultural producers, and by this methodological approach, Aaron Davis tried to suggest on the domain of political economy 3 steps to do this. First, gathers quantitative data on children films, and we do this by gathers quantitative data on production and revenue before pandemic in 2015 to 2019, or 5 years before pandemic era, and the pandemic era in 2020 to 2021. And the second step, we analyze the external factors and on macro levels, and we analyze it through the regulations on children's films in Indonesian cinema. And the third step, or the last step, we try to analyze and link the quantitative data and external factors, and we try to find the problems to answer our question of why the children films in Indonesia is low in number. For the first part, let's look at the numbers from production and revenue figures of Indonesian cinema. Regarding the set of data, we look at several sources. The first one is actually the legal classification for theatrical releases in Indonesia. There are 4 categories. First one is the general, or the or semua umur. So it's a category for films that are deemed acceptable for audience of all ages. And then the 3 others are more limited. We have the 30 plus, 17 plus, and 21 plus. So there is no specific category for children films, and based on this situation, we assume that children is included in the general or semua umur category. And then another source of data that we look at is filmindonesia.org.id, Encyclopedia of Indonesian Films. It's basically IMDb for Indonesian films. They have a special category, children films. So we look at the films that are listed in that category. And also from the same website, they also provide the number for spectators of each theatrical release. And while they don't provide the revenue numbers, they can estimate from the spectatorship data. So from the data that we managed to gather from the sources, this is the situation before the pandemic. We could see that each year we have more than 100 Indonesian films released in theaters. From each year, there are very few number of general rated or semua umur films. Because of that, we could see that we have even fewer children films. And from the data, we could see that in 2015, for example, we basically have no children films. And the years after that, the number of children films are basically just half of the number of general rated or SO rated films in Indonesia. With this situation, it is logical, and actually it is quite predictable that the same pattern continued during the pandemic, but even worse. I mean, in the first year of the pandemic, in 2020, for example, the number of Indonesian films decreased significantly because of the pandemic, and it managed to improve this year, 2021. But the number of the general rated films and consequently the children films, they actually decreased a lot, half. So from the situation, we could see the trends or the production trends in Indonesian cinema. And from the same sources, understanding the number is just one part of the equation. Another equation is to see what films are actually being considered as safe or suitable for all ages, and what films are actually considered as children films or safe for children consumption. And we pick out some of the more popular titles that are actually being talked or at least being discussed in the movie going public in Indonesia, and we found that there is a very significant difference between the films that are rated as general or SU rated films and films in the children category. I mean, in the SU rated or the general rated films, several titles, it might not be as general, or I think that should be put into different categories such as Kartini or Banda. Both are historical films. They look at the history of colonization. They have certain conflicts that might involve certain acts that might require lots of explanation from adults, for example, based on this situation. So, looking at things in more detail, we could see that the number of spectators. It's quite surprising to see that the spectator numbers for the general rated films are actually very low. They are not even 10% of the total cinema attendance for Indonesian films each year. I mean, and based on this number of spectators, the pattern here continues. Of course, it continues in the number of revenues. It shows that the general rated films, they contribute very little commercially to the Indonesian film industry, and because of that, they could assume that children's films contributes even less than for the economy.
And we try to figuring out why it happens, why all of the S-rated films is maybe it's not a children films. In peraturan pemerintah nomor 18 tahun 2014 tentang sensor film, this rules is a rules for the censorship board, and it regulates age classification and criteria, especially in chapter 4 and the S rating in the article 33. And here's what we found. There are 6 points in the S rating film. However, this explanation is article 33 is too little. That's no further explanation or no further foundation about this. So I guess the film Indonesia.org.id and the rating have a different interpretation because it could be multiple interpretation and because it's too general. And the second one is the derived rules to implement the rules of the censorship board. This is the Permendikbud nomor 14 tahun 2019, which regulates the censorship guidelines. It has a detailed censorship guidelines, but here's we found that it has 6 points of the sin that should be as the censorship criteria to make a film is labeled as SQ rating, 13 plus, 17 plus, or 21 plus. There are 6 points. However, this point is not detailed and it have a multiple interpretation. And what they found in the SQ rating definition in this regulation, we found that it's identical to peraturan pemerintah. It's identical to the regulation about censorship board because as the derived regulation, it's too general. That's why it has a multiple interpretation among the film society. As we said before, it become the problems in the implementation that as already as a semua umur rating is say that children film is for everyone, and there's no film specifically made for children. That's a problem we found here, and the children as spectator considered as a package of the adults, and adults came as a companion for children. That children watching the film with adults, but the adults is also the figure who decide the films to watch or not. And by this logic, we see that adults as the real consumers of children films. Children maybe watch that movie. However, the adults decide.
Okay, continuing from Mazda, we could arrive on certain conceptual conclusions, I think. In Indonesia, when we talk about children films, it's basically films that are made for audience of all ages. It's films that are made for a wide group of people, for a general audience. So those films, they do not necessarily speak from a child's perspective, and more often than not, they require adult assistance for the films to be enjoyed or even understood by children. So what we have here, we have films that are actually marketed as children films, but they are not representative for children. From this situation, it shows that perhaps in Indonesia, there has been very few understanding, or there has not been many research about children in general, because if we look at the regulations that are related to children or to children's rights, most of them express children only as age groups, but rarely as psychological, social, or even cultural profiles. So, in fact, we have a very shallow understanding of being a children. We do not understand them actually. So, because of that shallow understanding, we also have a shallow interpretation of children films in the film society in general, and this actually a situation that calls for improvement. The challenge that awaits us is that we need to improve and organize many more research on what is it being a children in Indonesia. What does it mean being a children being children in Indonesia? And we need to take into further consideration of the cultural or the specificity of the living conditions in Indonesia. And perhaps if we have research like that, perhaps the Indonesian film industry would also benefit from the insights produced from this research. So to conclude our presentation, just like Masda said, when we said for children film in Indonesia, we're basically saying films for all audience, or films that are produced for general audience, and a challenge that requires improvement in the future, because by saying that children film is for everyone, we are actually neglecting the children themselves. Because of that, it is safe to say that we have the lack of children films that we are experiencing nowadays. It's actually because we do not understand children at all. This ends our presentation. We look forward to your opinions and your discussions, especially that since this research is a preliminary study, any input would be very valuable for us. Thank you so much.
Okay, from the presentation from Masda Radita Roromari and Adrian Jonathan Pasaribu about Indonesian children films before and during pandemic shows that the spectators or the quantity of films in pandemic decreased by 50% in children category and semua umur category or general category. They are focused on the regulation and cultural as the limitation about why the children films category are not developed really well in before and during pandemics. And cultural aspect about parenting also makes like parents as the decision maker on film consumption, and arise about a new question how to focus on children spectators. They are concluding that we filmmakers or film industries still doesn't understand how to make a good film for children, and we do not have children spectators about it. But unfortunately, for the presentation about Indonesian children films and before and during pandemic, we are not going to discuss because the presentation are not present in this panel. So the participant is have a question about the first presentation from Ivana Ardelia about construction of pleasure and sensuality in film Tali Pocong Perawan and Tali Pocong Perawan 2. Please ask your question. Is there any question for the first presentation? maybe I have one question for Ivana. You see the fact for in Tali Pocong Perawan first and the second one, there is a different portion, a smaller portion about the aspects, sensual aspects. Is there any explanation for that, Ivana? Di Tali Pocong Perawan pertama dan kedua itu jumlah porsi sensualitasnya itu menurun. Apakah ada sedikit penjelasan tentang itu, Ivana?
Yang dimaksud penurunan porsi scene dari sensuality-nya itu kalau di Tali Pocong Perawan 1 itu kan dari awal scene mulai ya, itu kan diperlihatkan di kolam renang, terus di mana Nino sama pacarnya kakaknya Nino tuh bercinta gitulah sebutnya. Terus setelah itu kita dilanjutkan dengan scene di mana memperlihatkan Nino yang sedang masturbasi. Kemudian balik lagi scene kemudian habis itu dilanjutkan dengan scene di mana Nino itu ngintip ke kamar kakaknya, di mana kakaknya sama Firni ini lagi bercinta. Terus itu ada lagi di mana Nino itu kayak istilahnya tuh memperhatikan tubuhnya Firni dari ujung kepalanya sampai ujung kakinya dan benar-benar diperhatikan semendetail itu. Kemudian di Tali Pocong Perawan 1 itu kamera tuh dioperasikan sebagai sudut pandang pria. Jadi diperlihatkan keseluruhan tubuh wanita dari ujung kepala sampai ujung kaki. Walaupun maksudnya nggak selalu Firni yang diperlihatkan, terus ada scene di mana yang temannya Firni sedang mandi, itu kayak benar-benar dilihatin dari dia lepas pakaian, terus sampai dia masuk ke dalam bathtub, sampai dia mandi. Tapi kalau untuk Tali Pocong Perawan 2, walaupun masih meng-highlight bagian payudaranya, kemudian masih ada pakai pakaian ketat dan ada adegan masturbasinya, menurut saya itu gimana ya, kayak sedikit mengurangi porsinya lah dan menambahkan sisi horornya di Tali Pocong Perawan 2. Kan maksudnya cuma memperlihatkan badan cewek, nggak ada yang scene yang istilahnya scene bercintanya tuh nggak sebanyak di Tali Pocong Perawan 1 kayak gitu.
Ada nggak alasan yang mungkin ditemukan ketika penelitian itu, alasan kenapa kok di Tali Pocong Perawan kedua itu jumlahnya lebih sedikit?
Alasannya mungkin karena tokoh utamanya cewek ya kalau menurut saya, karena kan kayak tingkat atau tingkat nafsu cowok sama cewek itu kan berbeda. Jadi sutradaranya tuh mau kalau menurut kami sutradaranya itu lebih menunjukkan tingkat nafsu cowok itu seperti ini dalam Tali Pocong Perawan 1. Kemudian untuk Tali Pocong Perawan 2, tingkat nafsu cewek itu tuh seperti ini, membedakannya kayak gitu.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Ivana. For the participants, I am welcome if you have a question for the first presentation by Ivana Ardelia. And one more, maybe Ivana, for me, I'm the one who questioning here. In the maybe last 5 years or Tali Pocong Perawan second is in 2012, I believe. Is there any newer horror movie which also practicing the same way as the Tali Pocong Perawan pertama dan kedua, and first and second? Ada nggak ya di film-film yang sekarang ini mungkin kontekstualnya tuh mirip dengan Tali Pocong? Apakah itu masih relevan hingga film-film horor sekarang, Ivana?
Kalau menurut pandangan saya ya, film horor sekarang itu Mungkin yang terakhir ada adegan seksual seperti ini di Wanita Tanah Jahanam ya, kalau menurut saya itu ada scene di mana yang di pokoknya scene lagi bercinta lah istilahnya. Baru film itu aja sih yang saya ketemu maksudnya memperlihatkan adegan seksualnya ya. Tapi untuk film horor yang lainnya menurut saya ya sama hal kayak umumnya, maksudnya ngagetin, nakutin, bikin penonton takut kayak gitu. Untuk yang kayak erotisme seperti ini menurut saya film horor sekarang udah jarang sih. Malah lebih ke menggali hal-hal mistis dari daerah tertentu atau emang menceritakan dari pengalaman seseorang kayak gitu.
But interesting, we see that tali pocong perawan still have cultural belief like the pocong rope, ya, tali pocongnya harus di ini untuk attraction ya. Romantic attraction, yeah, sex opposite attraction, like this maybe only in Southeast Asia or maybe only in Indonesia that we have those beliefs. Yeah. I don't have many reference in horror movie, like there are so much cultural belief except maybe Jalangkung, that strong cultural belief. This is last call for participant. If there's any question, please question for the Ivan Ardelia. Okay, if there's not any question for the presentation, this will be the end of this panel. I would like to thank the participant for the attention as response and the response, also the panelists for the presentation. Before we close this panel, we will have a photo session, and the co-host please assist me for the photo session. And the presenters like Ivana, maybe we can turn on the camera for the photo session. The co-host for the photo session ready? Okay, I will count to 3 for the screen capturing. Please smile to the camera. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you, Ivana, for the presentation, and also I would like to thank to the committee for the hard work and making this event happen. And the participant also welcome in another panel room. Maybe that's all for this panel. Thank you and see you next time.